Today, we are wrestling with one of the most pressing and, honestly, one of the most bizarre resource paradoxes gripping the global high-tech economy.
It really is.
We're talking about an element that's the second most abundant in the entire observable universe, helium.
Right.
Yet, here on Earth, it is scarce, it's finite, non-renewable, and frankly, every single second we're just wasting it.
It is a truly unique challenge. Unlike almost any other critical element, when helium escapes Earth, it doesn't just dissipate into the upper atmosphere.
It's just gone.
It achieves escape velocity and it's gone forever.
And it really charts an intense global race, a scramble, really.
A scramble is the right word. To secure a new, clean, sustainable supply of this indispensable gas.
Yeah.
We're looking for what the industry has now dubbed green helium.
And this journey is going to take us from, the deep radioactive crustal rocks of Africa and the U.S.
All the way to the cutting edge of cryogenic engineering and, eventually, even to potential mining sites on the moon.
Okay, let's unpack this. Let's start with the core problem. We all know helium from, party balloons.
The classic, slightly wasteful use.
Exactly, and an application that rightly frustrates a lot of scientists because it just represents pure loss. But the uses that actually matter, the really critical, indispensable applications, are purely high-tech and essential to modern infrastructure.
That's right.
So tell us exactly why we absolutely need this gas and why we can't just substitute it with something else.
Well, the need stems entirely from its unique physical properties. Helium has the lowest boiling point of any known element.
And what is that?
It's minus 269 degrees Celsius. Nothing else even comes close. And this makes it the single perfect cryogenic coolant for applications that need temperatures near absolute zero.
And those applications are everywhere, right? Even in just standard medical procedures.
Exactly. In the medical and scientific fields, it's absolutely vital for cooling the massive superconducting magnets you find in MRI scanners.
So if you've had an MRI.
If you've had an MRI, you have indirectly relied on liquid helium to achieve the necessary magnetic field stability and strength. It's that simple.
Wow.
And similarly, in pure science, it's indispensable in nuclear research facilities, like the Large Hadron Collider at CERN.
Of course.
That facility requires just vast amounts of liquid helium to maintain the superconducting state of its magnets, which are guiding particles around that huge ring. Without it, the experiments they stop.
So beyond medicine and big science, the sources also highlight its role in industrial stability and advanced manufacturing. What's the connection there?
For general industry, its application is sort of twofold. First, its tiny molecular size makes it the perfect tracer gas for leak detection.
Oh.
In high-pressure systems, nuclear reactors, vacuum chambers. Basically, if helium can't get out, then nothing can.
Makes sense.
And second, it plays a critical, often unseen role in advanced manufacturing. It's used as a shielding gas to prevent contamination when you're growing silicon wafers for high-end microchips.
So in our computers and phones.
Absolutely. And it's also relied upon for creating the massive structurally sound components for modern wind turbines. It's even critical for ensuring the purity of the environments where, advanced AI systems and quantum computing hardware are produced.
Now here's where it gets really important for you, the listener. The clean energy transition. How does this noble gas actually enable the shift away from fossil fuels?
Well, it enables grid stability at scale. The major global hurdle in adopting intermittent energy sources like wind and solar is storage.
Right. What do you do when the sun isn't shining or the wind isn't blowing?
Exactly. Future large-scale renewable energy storage systems, which are necessary to manage this, they rely on helium's unique cryogenic properties to cool their massive superconducting components.
Okay, so we're talking about things like superconducting magnetic energy storage SMES systems, or maybe advanced batteries that have to be kept near absolute zero to operate with minimal energy loss.
Precisely. These next-generation storage systems, they can store just tremendous amounts of excess power and then release it instantly when it's needed, which stabilizes the grid.
But they only work if they're superconducting.
And they only become superconducting when they're supercooled by liquid helium. So securing the helium supply isn't just an industrial concern, it's a critical enabling component for a successful, stable, low-carbon future.
Now this brings us to the traditional problem, which is inherently polluting. Conventional helium extraction is tied, almost inextricably, to the hydrocarbon industry.
That is the structural flaw that we're now trying to fix. Historically, natural helium supplies have mostly been discovered by accident.
Just stumbled upon it.
Stumbled upon it usually in small quantities because the gas is only occasionally co-produced with natural gas, particularly during liquefied natural gas or LNG processing.
So this traditional method directly ties helium production to fossil fuels.
It does, and that increases our industrial dependence on hydrocarbons, and what's more, the associated practices like flaring, burning off unwanted methane and other gases during drilling, that significantly increases CO2 emissions and environmental risk.
So the global goal here is to functionally divorce helium from oil and gas production. And that leads us directly to our core mission statement, defining green helium. What makes it green, scientifically and economically?
Green helium, or what the industry often calls primary helium, is gas sourced directly from dedicated underground reservoirs that contain minimal or ideally no hydrocarbons at all.
And the green part?
The green part comes from the mandate that the entire process has to be produced without generating greenhouse gas emissions. This specifically eliminates environmentally damaging practices like flaring, which are so common when natural gas is the primary target.
So it's a completely different approach.
A completely different approach. By focusing on primary helium, advanced extraction techniques can also minimize land disturbance and reduce the intensive water usage you see with traditional fracking. It's an end-to-end sustainable supply chain goal that decouples a critical resource from hydrocarbon dependence.
That sets the stage perfectly for this deep dive. We're looking for high-grade, low-carbon helium deposits, and that quest has sparked a massive global scramble, pushing exploration into totally new, non-traditional territories.
Let's start with just the sheer economic pressure that's driving this search. The market size is pretty impressive. Global demand for helium hit 30,000 tons, which was a billion-dollar market way back in 2010.
And the sources show that that demand curve is it's getting steeper.
It's accelerating steeply. The demand is expected to double in the next 2 decades.
Doubling in 20 years. I mean, that implies some serious long-term supply chain instability if we don't find new sources, and fast.
It does, and the specific consumption forecasts are what we should really be looking at. They project a significant 5 to 7% annual growth rate starting from 2027 onward. And this is fueled largely by, the proliferation of AI, advanced manufacturing, and those cryogenic energy storage systems we just talked about.
So what does that look like in terms of volume?
Well, global consumption is expected to jump from an estimated 6 billion cubic feet, or BCF right now, to a monumental 10 BCF by the year 2030.
That is a massive volume increase in a very, very short time frame.
It is, and what makes this so difficult is that most existing sources barely contain any helium at all, so the processing cost just skyrockets.
Right, and I noticed there was a clear economic threshold mentioned in the sources that really defines the viability of these new primary sources.
Absolutely. Conventional natural gas reservoirs, they typically contain a tiny fraction of a percent of helium, often less than 0.05% concentration by volume.
It's basically nothing.
Almost nothing. If a gas source manages to have content above 0.1%, it's already considered helium-rich. And this is the key metric. The higher the concentration, the lower the extraction cost.
And that's essential for making these primary sources commercially viable against the old polluting byproduct model.
It is. For dedicated helium operations, the cost of compression, separation, and liquefaction is immense, and you just need a high-value stream to justify that kind of capital expenditure.
Which is exactly why these new dedicated discoveries are so disruptive. They fundamentally change the economics of the entire global supply chain.
They do.
So let's look at a pioneer in the US pulsar helium in Minnesota. What makes their Topaz project a true first mover in a brand new helium province?
The Topaz project is a genuine global game changer purely because of its extraordinary concentration levels. They have confirmed one of the world's highest content helium discoveries, with gas flowing at up to 14.5% helium.
Okay, let's just pause on that number, 14.5%. If the industry widely accepts an economic threshold of, 0.3%, and that's already considered good, what does 14.5% mean in practical terms for the cost structure?
I mean, it fundamentally rewrites the entire cost-benefit analysis. Think of it this way. In a conventional LNG byproduct plant, to get 1 cubic foot of usable helium, you might need to process 1,000 or even 2,000 cubic feet of raw gas.
A huge amount of raw material.
A huge amount. But at 14.5%, for every 100 cubic feet of gas you pump out, 14.5 feet is already valuable helium. That drastically reduces the size, the complexity, and most importantly, the energy requirement of the separation and purification plants that come after.
So they're operating at something like 48 times the accepted economic threshold.
Roughly, yes. And that provides a massive buffer against processing complexities and, price volatility in the market.
That is the analytical difference that really matters. That high concentration translates directly into massive capital and operational expenditure savings in the energy-intensive processing phase.
So what were the operational metrics they've confirmed so far? Their Jetstream #1 appraisal well, which assessed the full reservoir height, was successfully fleet tested recently. And this test delivered a strong peak gas flow rate of approximately 1.3 million cubic feet per day.
So it's not just concentrated, it flows well.
Exactly. Identifying the top-tier concentrations is step one, but proving the reservoir can deliver a high flow rate consistently, that's the critical step toward proving it's commercially scalable and, bankable.
And crucially, this U.S. discovery is making a deliberate commitment to the green methodology right from the start, which addresses that whole fossil fuel problem.
Absolutely. They are committed to that primary helium definition. Pulsar is partnering with Chart Industries, who we'll definitely discuss later as they're a global leader in this kind of cryogenic technology, for an integrated helium extraction and carbon dioxide liquefaction plant.
So this is the key to their green commitment, right?
Yeah.
Managing the co-produced key oil.
It is. They are utilizing Chart's Earthly Labs CC solution. This is a full carbon capture unit designed specifically to capture, compress, and then liquefy the co-produced K-Euro that naturally comes out of the gas stream.
So instead of flaring it or just venting it into the atmosphere,
They're capturing it and turning it into liquefied Comore.
so they're not just avoiding environmental damage, they're actually creating another product stream.
Precisely. They create diversified revenue streams from that captured K-Euro. They eliminate the environmental risk associated with emissions, and they align themselves perfectly with the definition of green primary helium production.
That's a very sophisticated approach.
By engaging in this detailed design process now, ahead of the final construction contract in 2026, they're essentially de-risking both the environmental compliance and the development schedule at the same time.
That's smart. Now let's shift continents to Africa, which the sources highlight as having just massive untapped potential for helium-rich gas reserves. We have two major hotspots, Tanzania and South Africa. Let's start with Helium-1 in Tanzania's Rukwa Basin.
Tanzania presents a truly fascinating geological case. The sources indicate that scientists, working with Helium-1, found that heat originating from active volcanoes in the East African Rift Valley plays a pivotal role.
So the tectonic activity is basically acting like a furnace.
A persistent furnace, yeah. It's essentially baking the deep, ancient rocks which are rich in uranium and thorium.
So the volcanic heat is speeding up that natural alpha decay process deep in the crust, releasing more helium, which then migrates upward.
That's the hypothesis. This heat-driven release mechanism leverages the continent's existing tectonic activity to feed the reservoirs. And what they found at the Rukwa project are extraordinarily high concentrations.
What kind of numbers are we talking about?
Samples showed between 8% and 10.2% helium.
Again, just numbers that are far beyond any conventional threshold. But the gas stream composition itself is unique here, isn't it?
It is. What's unique is that approximately 90% of the remaining gas stream is nitrogen. And this is critical because it contrasts significantly with conventional fields, which are mostly co-produced with methane.
Natural gas.
Right. And processing a nitrogen-rich stream requires a different set of cryogenic tools than processing a methane-rich stream, which, we can dive into in part 3. Significant flows were discovered in the Atumbula West area in September 2024, confirming the reservoir size.
And what does Helium-1's development timeline look like for such a massive find in what sounds like a really complex geological setting?
Well, they're planning a highly detailed phased approach. The first phase is an early production system, an EPS, consisting of 5 wells, with production scheduled to commence in the third quarter of 2026.
And that EPS is critical for proving out the reservoir at scale.
It is. It serves to further appraise the area and prove the reservoir characteristics. If that's successful, it'll be followed by a full central production facility, a CPF, coming online in November of 2027.
Now here's where the technical distinction from conventional extraction really stands out. The gas isn't trapped in traditional dry reservoirs. It's linked to water.
That is the operational complexity. Unlike conventional gas, the helium in the Rukwa Basin is accumulated and stored within water aquifers and the basement rocks themselves.
So how do they get it out?
To access this helium, they plan to use electric submersible pumps, or ESPs, in the subsurface production wells. These are designed to deliver 20,000 barrels per day of water just to access the helium that's dissolved or trapped within those aquifer waters.
That's a very unconventional approach for a gas resource.
It is. It demands specialized water management and gas separation techniques right from the very beginning.
Okay, so moving south, let's turn our attention to Renergen's Virginia gas project in South Africa, which is equally unique geologically.
This site is truly distinct. The microbial gas field is situated within an ancient, enormous asteroid crater.
An asteroid crater.
Yes, and this geology is believed to have contributed to one of the globally richest concentrations of helium ever recorded. The average concentration is around 3%, but they've recorded up to 12% in specific well tests.
And 3% is already way above that 0.1% threshold, making it viable immediately. But what makes the associated gas stream so appealing for processing, beyond just the helium concentration?
The associated gas is exceptionally clean. It's noted as being over 90% methane, but crucially, it has very low levels of the common impurities that plague gas processing.
Like what?
Well, it contains almost zero hydrogen sulfide ester, which is corrosive and toxic, and very low carbon dioxide, or BORO. This purity just greatly simplifies the subsequent liquefaction and purification stages.
So it reduces the need for costly and complex impurity removal infrastructure.
Exactly. It's a massive economic benefit.
So what's the scale of their ambition, particularly for Phase 2?
Phase 1 aims for about 310 kilograms per day of helium, so small-scale commercial production.
A proof of concept.
Exactly. Phase 2, however, which is targeted for commercial production in 2027, is designed to produce about 4.2 tons per day of helium.
4.2 tons a day. What does that mean in a global context?
That production capacity would represent approximately 10% of global helium demand.
Wow.
It would position South Africa as a globally significant net exporter of this critical element.
And we should also mention the corporate and national context here. The sources indicate this is a strategic national asset for South Africa.
Oh, it is indeed strategic. South Africa is positioning key resources like these strategic gases alongside nuclear energy as long-term industrial pillars.
I see.
And the proposed acquisition of Renergen by ASP Isotopes, an advanced materials company, has secured all required regulatory approvals, with implementation expected in December of 2025. This move just underscores the strategic global importance of securing such a high-volume resource.
But even with these high-grade reserves, the ultra-low temperature requirements of helium present these major, persistent technical hurdles. Renergen has faced some specific documented challenges in bringing Phase 1 online.
They have, and it gives us a great insight into the difficulties of this industry. I mean, helium's boiling point of minus 269 Celsius is the ultimate technical challenge.
So what happened?
Renergen reported technical difficulties cooling the specialized ISO containers required for transport to that incredibly cold cryogenic temperature. They also reported a leak in the helium cold box, which caused significant delays to Phase 1.
So this is not just simple natural gas compression. This is extreme temperature physics.
That's right. And I understand the cooling process isn't linear either, which surprised me.
Oh, so.
The company has acknowledged that they expect the time required to fill and cool the containers to decrease exponentially as production ramps up, not linearly.
So getting the system initially chilled takes a disproportionate amount of time and energy.
A huge amount. The challenge is maintaining that cold chain efficiency once the system is fully operational and mitigating those supply chain vulnerabilities.
And beyond the technical setbacks, the sources also point to environmental objections raised against the project. What are the key points of contention there?
They have faced objections, specifically from the Center for Environmental Rights. The concerns revolve around the project's integrated water and waste management plan and, critically, the climate change impact assessment.
And how has that played out?
Well, while most of the appeal grounds were dismissed, they still face unresolved issues concerning the scope of the climate change assessment and the development of a broader geohydrological model for the region.
Which is specifically addressing water usage in a water-stressed environment.
Exactly. They are actively working to submit updated assessments to satisfy those regulatory requirements.
What's fascinating here is that whether we're in Minnesota or South Africa, the challenge is identical.
It really is.
You have to find primary sources, prove high concentration to make it viable, and then you have to tackle the subsequent massive technical challenge of cryogenic purification and storage.
And that concentration is the key that unlocks the economics of green extraction. It's a global confirmation that the geologic hunt is now focused squarely on finding gas that is helium-rich from the outset, rather than relying on a low-concentration, high-carbon byproduct.
To really understand why these new discoveries are so rare and so highly valued, we need to go deep underground and talk about how helium is actually formed in the first place. I mean, it's not a static resource like coal, right? It's being produced constantly, slowly, over geological time.
That's correct. The helium we are tapping into is entirely crust-derived. It primarily originates from radioactive decay, specifically alpha decay of heavy radioactive elements.
And what are those elements?
The main contributors are uranium, U, and thorium, Tate, which are embedded within the deep, ancient metamorphic and magmatic basement rocks of the Earth's crust.
So every time an atom of uranium or thorium decays deep in the Earth's crust, it releases a massive positively charged particle, an alpha particle.
Which is essentially a helium nucleus.
Right. And that nucleus quickly captures free electrons in the surrounding rock matrix to become a stable helium atom.
Precisely. It is a slow, steady, background generation process that happens everywhere in the crust where these radioactive elements exist. The challenge isn't creating helium. The hard part is collecting enough of those individually produced atoms over geological timescales into a single commercial reserve.
And our sources stress that for helium to accumulate commercially, you need three synergistic geological factors.
Absolutely required. And a failure in any one of those factors means no viable reserve.
Okay, so what are those three essential synergistic factors?
First, you need large-scale source rocks, so extensive geological formations enriched in uranium and thorium, typically ancient, dense basement rocks like gneiss, granulite, and granite.
Okay, so you need the source.
Then second, you must have effective migration pathways, deep-rooted faults and fracture networks that act as highly efficient channels for the gas to migrate from those deep source rocks up to shallower reservoirs.
And the third, and what sounds like the most difficult, is stringent preservation conditions. A robust, fixed seal.
It is the single most critical constraint, and this all comes down to molecular size. Helium has an extremely small molecular radius, about 0.26 nanometers.
And how does that compare to, say, methane?
Well, methane, the primary component of most natural gas, has a radius of 0.42 nanometers. Because helium is so much smaller and lighter, it has strong diffusivity. It's incredibly prone to escape and leakage, far more so than any hydrocarbon.
So if methane is like trying to contain dust with a fine mesh, trying to contain helium is like trying to contain vapor with a standard window screen. It just wants to diffuse through the smallest possible opening in the geological formation.
That's an excellent analogy. Therefore, commercial accumulation demands geological seals of exceptional quality and thickness.
Like what?
Formations like dense salt rocks and certain types of mudstones are necessary to prevent the diffusion and leakage of that tiny helium molecule from the shallow reservoir back into the atmosphere. This is why primary helium reservoirs require much more stringent preservation conditions than typical hydrocarbon reservoirs.
And the sources provided a fantastic, analytical, real-world example of this complex system working in China, in the Ordos Basin. How does that basin illustrate this three-part model and help explorers globally?
The integrated analysis in the Ordos Basin, which is a massive prospective gas province, revealed a key finding: significant spatial heterogeneity in helium enrichment.
So in simple terms, the helium concentrations were not uniform across the basin.
Not at all. They were distinctly higher along the basin margins and in structurally complex zones areas with lots of faults, while the central placid areas were relatively depleted.
So high helium concentrations correlate with tectonic disturbance, which suggests the faults are the migration mechanism. But how did they pinpoint the source rocks?
That was the breakthrough the research provided. They used high-resolution gravity and magnetic data tools, typically used for mapping basement structure and metal deposits.
Interesting.
And the scientists found that high helium concentrations align positively with zones of strong basement magnetism. These magnetic anomaly belts, specifically belts running in the northeast to southwest direction, correspond directly to the distribution of strongly magnetic metamorphic rocks and magmatites.
Which are the source rocks, the uranium and thorium-rich granulite and gneiss.
Exactly. So the Chinese researchers are essentially using magnetometers tools originally designed for finding iron ore or mapping crustal movement to indirectly map helium source rocks deep underground.
That's an amazing cross-disciplinary leap for exploration.
It is. The comparison between wells showing high helium content and the magnetic anomaly distribution demonstrated a strong positive correlation. Those high-content wells were predominantly located along these regional high magnetic anomaly belts, proving that the basement magnetism is a reliable proxy for the presence of the radioactive source material.
And the researchers in the Ordos Basin distill this into a definitive predictive model that explorers are now using globally.
They did. They proposed an enrichment model that encapsulates these three synergistic factors perfectly. Basement-sourced helium generation, which is traced via the magnetic anomalies,
Right.
fault-mediated migration, which is traced via structural complexity,
Yeah.
and
Partner.
finally, caprock-controlled preservation. It's an elegant summary of a vast, slow geological process and provides the predictive framework for primary helium exploration in similar stable cratonic settings worldwide, whether that's in Minnesota or Tanzania.
Okay, so once these high-grade gas streams are found and analyzed, the next major hurdle, the industrial one, is processing.
Right.
Helium has to be meticulously separated from its co-produced gases, which could be 90% nitrogen, 90% methane, or a mix of hydrogen and co-uros. And this is done not only to recover the valuable helium, but also to purify the residual gas stream for other uses.
And this initial separation is where the cryogenics begin. This process is so dependent on temperature, it sounds like an incredibly delicate balancing act.
It's a massive engineering feat. The initial recovery and coarse separation rely heavily on cryogenic fractionation.
So using extremely low temperatures to liquefy the unwanted components while keeping the helium gaseous.
Exactly. And this is often performed in equipment originally developed for LNG plants, specifically specialized units called nitrogen rejection units, or NRUs.
Especially if the feed gas is nitrogen rich, like what they have in Tanzania.
Right. So walk us through the general process of cryogenic fractionation for gas separation.
Well, the process leverages the different boiling points of the components. Methane boils at about minus 162 Celsius, nitrogen at minus 196, and of course helium way down at minus 269.
Huge differences.
Huge. So by selectively cooling the gas stream using techniques like multi-stage flash separators or, for very complex streams, highly optimized double-column distillation processes, the different components liquefy sequentially.
So the heavier components drop out as liquids.
And the helium, because it stays gaseous longer than anything else, concentrates in the overhead vapors.
And what kind of purity do these initial power-intensive steps typically achieve?
Well, it's depending on the complexity and the feed gas composition, these cryogenic processes can achieve a concentration of about 50 to 70% helium in those overhead vapors.
So that's a huge improvement from the initial 3% or 14.5% content, but it is a long way from the 99.995% purity required for sensitive high-tech applications.
A very long way. And that brings us to step 2, upgrading and purification. We have to get that crude helium to at least 90% concentration before we can even begin the final liquefaction process.
And this is where the process becomes multi-staged and highly specialized.
It does. Achieving 99.995% purity requires eliminating all trace impurities. And this multi-step purification process starts with the bulk condensation of the most prevalent impurities that remain after the initial cryogenic separation.
And if the gas stream contains trace hydrogen, as is often the case in these underground gas fields, that has to be dealt with quickly.
Oh, absolutely. Trace hydrogen has to be removed using a specialized stage called catalytic oxidation.
Why is that so important?
Hydrogen is highly flammable. Even trace amounts could be catastrophic in a high-pressure cryogenic plant. The catalytic oxidation converts that residual hydrogen into water vapor, which can then be easily removed.
Okay, and after that?
Following that, they employ highly specialized units called pressure swing adsorption, or PSA units.
PSA units. It sounds like they do a lot of the heavy fine-tuning lifting to get the purity to the required level.
They are absolutely critical. PSA units work by utilizing specific adsorbent materials, often molecular sieves or activated carbon, that selectively hold onto impurity molecules under high pressure.
And the process cycles between high-pressure adsorption and low-pressure desorption.
Hence the name pressure swing. In the upgrading process, PSA units are responsible for removing water, carbon dioxide, and oxygen. Then a separate subsequent PSA unit is required to remove the final, stubbornly small traces of nitrogen.
And that's what finally pushes the product up towards that 99.995% purity goal. That's right.
That's just intense engineering to remove tiny residual amounts of common elements. Now, we've been talking about conventional processes, but are there emerging technologies aiming to streamline this, particularly for those nitrogen-rich fields we saw in Tanzania?
Yes. The cost and energy requirement of cryogenic distillation is immense, so there is significant research into integrating membrane separation stages.
Ah, Okay.
Specifically, 2 or 3-stage membrane systems are being researched as a feasible, lower-energy technology for recovering and purifying helium, especially from those challenging nitrogen-rich streams before they head into the final PSA step.
So why membrane separation for this particular application? What's the benefit?
The benefit lies in its inherent selectivity for the tiny helium molecule. Membranes work by allowing the small helium molecule to pass through the material much faster than the larger nitrogen molecule.
So it's like a molecular sieve. Exactly. For streams with high nitrogen concentrations and reasonable compression ratios, integrating these membrane stages for coarse separation, followed by optimized cryogenic distillation and then final PSA purification. Well, that appears to be the most economically promising integrated system design for maximizing yield and minimizing energy consumption.
And finally, step 3, liquefaction. This is the ultimate technical challenge, getting the pure gas down to -269 Celsius and keeping it there. I mean, the difficulties Renergen face in South Africa with their ISO containers are a stark reminder of this engineering feat.
Oh, they are. And the technology required to hit and maintain that temperature is highly specialized and proprietary. Liquefaction demands specialized industrial equipment, massive units called helium liquefier vacuum cold boxes.
And they're manufactured by only a handful of companies globally, like Chart Industries.
That's right. And these units are scaled for industrial capacity, often ranging from 50 to 600 million standard cubic feet per year.
And the complexity of the internal technology is just vast. It's not just a giant refrigerator.
Not at all. It is entirely optimized to balance the massive capital expenditure, the CapEx, required for the complex equipment, and the ongoing aspirational expenditure, the OpEx, to run the process.
So how does it work?
The optimized processes use a multi-stage cooling approach. First, liquid nitrogen pre-cooling, which gets the temperature down significantly to about -196 Celsius.
Okay.
Then, the process utilizes internal helium recycle refrigeration and custom-designed rotating equipment, highly precise turbine expanders, to achieve the final cryogenic state near absolute zero.
The cost of failure in this phase must be just astronomical. A single leak or component failure can stop production completely, which is why securing the supply chain from the ground all the way to the cold box is the bottleneck in the global race for green helium.
And as complex and critical as terrestrial green helium extraction is, the discussion doesn't stop at Earth's crust. Our sources indicate that the ultimate futuristic solution to securing a truly massive, high-grade helium resource, well, it could solve global energy needs for centuries.
And we're looking up to the moon.
To the moon, and specifically to the isotope helium-3, or He3.
So what makes He3 so valuable that we're actually contemplating the monumental cost and effort of space mining for it?
He3 is considered a massive potential resource because it is proposed as the ideal fuel for advanced, clean nuclear fusion reactions.
Okay, what's the specific reaction?
The reaction is deuterium combined with helium-3 results in hydrogen-1, helium-4, and a huge burst of energy.
That is the ultimate clean energy promise. But why is that reaction so much more desirable than the fusion reaction scientists are currently working on using, standard deuterium and tritium?
It's the holy grail of fusion because it is an anetronic reaction.
Anetronic.
It produces energy predominantly in the form of charged particles rather than high-energy neutrons, and this drastically reduces the activation of surrounding materials.
Meaning far less radioactive waste than current nuclear reactors produce.
Far less, and it makes plasma confinement much simpler. The only reason we don't use it on Earth is that He3 is incredibly rare here.
And it's rare because, unlike He4, which is produced naturally in the crust, He3 is primarily delivered by the solar wind.
Which is deflected by Earth's magnetic field.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the moon has no thick atmosphere or global magnetic field, so the solar wind has been bombarding its surface for billions of years, implanting He3 into the lunar regolith.
The moon's soil and rocks, making it an immense, stable, surface-level resource.
So how are we planning to physically retrieve this fuel from the lunar surface?
The primary method being studied is in situ mining, which means extracting the gas molecules directly from the lunar regolith without massive, disruptive physical excavation.
So what technology would allow us to do that without giant bulldozers?
The proposed technology involves a mobile vehicle that delivers intense thermal radiation or microwave energy directly onto the surface of the regolith. The heating to hundreds of degrees Celsius releases the volatile gas molecules that are locked into the lunar soil grains.
So the trapped He3, He4, hydrogen, carbon dioxide.
All of it. And I recall the sources contrasting thermal radiation with microwave processing in terms of efficiency.
Yes, microwave processing is noted as being significantly more energy efficient and faster for releasing the gases.
So, for example, using standard thermal radiation to heat the lunar regolith to a depth of just 1 centimeter would require about 5 hours to sufficiently release the gases.
Whereas microwave energy speeds that process up dramatically.
Exactly, which makes the industrial scale process more feasible in the lunar environment.
And once the gases are liberated by the heating process, how are they collected in the vacuum of space?
The released gases are collected within a specialized apparatus described as a collection tent or shroud that's placed over the heating area. The collection system funnels the liberated gases, which can then be separated and processed using cryogenic methods, similar to what we discussed in Part 3.
Just adapted for the lunar environment.
Right.
So let's discuss the sheer scale of operation needed to make this worth the astronomical cost. How much lunar soil do we have to process to get meaningful fusion fuel?
The scale is absolutely staggering. To produce just 38 metric tons of helium-3 annually, which is considered a substantial, meaningful fusion fuel supply, a truly monumental amount of lunar soil must be mined and processed per year.
We're talking about establishing a persistent industrial-scale mining and processing operation on the moon's surface.
We are.
But the benefit isn't just the fusion fuel. What other commercially valuable materials would be extracted as byproducts, making the whole venture more economically viable?
Absolutely. The lunar regolith is abundant in various other elements released by the heating process. In addition to the helium isotopes, valuable elements like aluminum could be extracted.
And the sources note that since there is no confirmed information about large copper deposits on the moon, aluminum could serve as an excellent replacement for producing electrical wiring.
It could. It's also useful for producing heat exchangers due to its high thermal conductivity.
And hydrogen, another component released in the collection process, is perhaps the most immediately valuable byproduct for ongoing space operations.
Correct. Hydrogen could be employed immediately for generating electricity in lunar fuel cells, which would be crucial for maintaining the functioning of various modules and machines.
And critically,
If it's combined with oxygen, which is also contained in the lunar regolith, it could be used to create water and rocket fuel for propulsion and life support.
so it's a closed-loop resource utilization dream. The waste product of one process becomes the essential fuel for another.
Exactly. The ultimate green helium source is technically a non-polluting, immense resource that solves both the future global energy challenge and the materials challenges for future space programs. Though firmly in the future, it gives us an idea of the lengths we're willing to go to secure this one critical element.
We have completed an amazing journey. Starting with the realization that we are running low on a critical gas, move through the discovery of phenomenal high-grade reserves in the deep crustal rocks of Africa and the U.S.
Analyze the extreme technical mastery required for purification to near absolute zero.
And finally charted a course to mine the moon for the ultimate clean fusion fuel. It is an amazing industrial race driven by urgent necessity.
It's more than just an industrial movement. It's a foundational component of modern technological stability. The global race to secure green or primary helium is an essential component of stabilizing high-tech global supply chains.
Right.
When we look at the growing demand for superconducting magnets in medicine and research, advanced component manufacturing for microelectronics, and cryogenic systems for AI, helium is the silent common denominator enabling all of it.
And the most important takeaway for the clean energy future we are all striving for.
Green helium directly enables the broad adoption of large-scale renewable energy storage systems. Without the cryogenic stability provided by readily available, cost-effective helium, the next generation of efficient, superconducting energy storage simply cannot function reliably or at a utility scale.
So this confirms helium's role as an absolutely critical mineral for the low-carbon energy future we are building.
It does. The stability of our power grids is literally dependent on keeping things extremely cold with this one element.
And that brings us back to the great paradox of helium. It's an element we desperately need here on Earth, produced from deep crustal decay, but its very nature means it just does not want to stay here.
That's the physics of the problem. Because it is so light, we know from atmospheric physics that helium molecules move much faster at a given temperature, and over time, through random collisions in the upper atmosphere, these molecules achieve escape velocity.
Which is why Earth lost its initial supply billions of years ago.
And it's why we have to constantly trap the slow, newly generated supply.
So, here is the final provocative thought for you to mull over. If we succeed in sustainably extracting massive new terrestrial reserves of primary helium, the high-grade green stuff, are we simply delaying its inevitable journey back into space and securing only a temporary supply? Or is the temporary industrial security we gain worth the price of entry into the next generation of clean energy, grid stability, and scientific breakthroughs? Something to think about the next time you benefit from an MRI machine or see a massive wind turbine spinning, knowing its core technology depends on the element that is constantly slipping away.